Every day, more than 1 billion people in more than 200 countries consume PepsiCo products. A true global power that moves more than $70 billion a year. From iconic soft drinks to irresistible snacks, the company has built an empire that dominates the beverage and food market. But what few know is that this thunderous success almost never happened. Before becoming one of the biggest names in industry, Pepsi faced bankruptcy, devastating crises, and even times when it seemed impossible to compete with its greatest rival, Coca-Cola. So how did this brand get to rise and turn into one of the most lucrative companies on the planet? To understand this story of overcoming and brilliant strategy, we need to go back to the year 1889, when a simple pharmacist named Caleb Bradham created the first version of Pepsi Cola without imagining that he was starting a revolution in the beverage market. Like many pharmacists at the time, Caleb had a source of soda in his pharmacy, where he served his own drinks. His most popular drink was something he called Brad Drink. It was a mixture of sugar, water, caramel, lemon oil, cola walnuts, walnuts, and other additives. And it was the perfect product to update and energize your customers. While the drink caught, he decided to give a faster name. Hoping to double the success of Coca-Cola, he called him Pepsi Cola. Like the original glue, the drink was sweet, carbonated, and with glue flavor. And it became so popular that Caleb founded his own company in 1902. He called Pepsi Cola Company. At first, Pepsi had been marketed as a digestive aid and tried to attract customers with exciting, invigorating words. AIDS, digestion. It may not be the most attractive slogan, but it seems that Pepsi Cola noted that too. While the brand flourished, they exchanged tactics and fell the slogan and began to rely more on celebrity power to increase sales. They hired Barney Oldfield as a gate. Barney was a famous car driver of the time and quickly became famous for her slogan, "Drinking Pepsi that satisfies him." The advertising campaign was a big hit, and Pepsi Cola would continue to use celebrities in the coming decades. But then the disaster occurred. After many years of success, the company fell into difficult times. After World War I, Caleb bet on sugar price fluctuations during the war, and believing sugar prices would continue to increase, he bought huge amounts of sugar. But unfortunately for him, exactly the opposite happened. This left Caleb with a very expensive sugar inventory. He lost the company, and Pepsi Cola went bankrupt. And now, at the time of Pepsi Cola's bankruptcy, Coca-Cola had long emerged as the dominant mark. It was being sold in the United States and numerous foreign countries. And the future could not have seemed worse for small Pepsi. A group of creditors has taken over the company's trademark, patents, and other actives for only $30,000. And a few months later, Roy Margarel bought them for $35,000. With full control of Pepsi Roy, he worked to keep the company alive, personally lending money and moving offices and planting to Richmond, Virginia. But despite his brave efforts, he failed to keep the company solvent when the Great Depression hit, and in 1931, Pepsi Cola was declared bankrupt again. That same year, Charles Guth entered the game, wanting to establish a new and successful Pepsi Cola company. He quickly started working and not only formulated a chemist, but also established new traffic jam operations. He started selling 12-ounce bottles for only 5 cents. Since Pepsi was basically offering twice as much what Coca-Cola offered in its 6 Jaguars bottles began to split twice for a nickel. And not much later, he marked an unexpected success as his nickel jingle became the first to be transmitted from coast to coast. Eventually, the music would be recorded in 55 languages and was even named one of the most effective ads of the 20th century. But there was also a problem with the lowest profit margin. Charles knew the company would have to grow if it wanted to survive. Then he built bottling plants across the country and signed hundreds of jackets. Today, this would be called scale. For the next 2 decades, Pepsi Cola continued to expand. And when Alfred Steele became CEO of Pepsi in 1950, exploded exponentially. As an ex-vice Coca-Cola president, Alfred knew it as advertising, and its emphasis on advertising campaigns and giant sales promotions has increased Pepsi Cola net profit elected 11 times. Finally made Pepsi the main competitor of the glue, but the glue was still surpassing more than 5 to 1. Coca-Cola built its domain with 3 little, very powerful, the real thing. Now, how do you compete with such a slogan? Well, Pepsi thought he knew exactly how to do that. After all, if Coke was the original real thing, it meant it was the choice of older people, right? Pepsi's solution was to take care of the then young baby boomers, and it has changed its focus on younger people with the Pepsi theme, the choice of a new generation. This change in marketing began in the early 60s, and it didn't take long for it to work. In just a few years, Pepsi cut the leadership of Coca-Cola in half. The Pepsi brand was growing rapidly and, to follow the moment, continued to change in different ways. In 1964, he launched his first diet soda, and with that, Pepsi became the first national glue to offer an option without calories to consumers. Diet Pepsi was clearly directed to young people, and in the same year, the company also acquired the popular Mountain Dew brand. Not a year later, Pepsi Cola merged with the fried Lay's snack manufacturer, and PepsiCo was born. Realizing that he needed to continue diversifying, the newly created PepsiCo broke out quickly to do just that. And from 1977 to 1986, bought 4 main Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC, and 7-Up international restaurants. Obviously, he also continued to focus on his Pepsi brand, and things were going so well that Pepsi, once failed, was threatening to travel to Coca-Cola as the best soda brand in the US. In addition, the brand also gained international headlines in 1974 when it became the first US product to be produced and sold at the USSR. But would that be enough? Although Coke remained the best-selling soda in the world, Pepsi continued to gain market share in the 1970s and early 1980s. His Pepsi Generation ads attracted younger drinkers, while older consumers have now been the target of their aggressive Pepsi Challenge campaign. The campaign consisted of consumers who were blinded testing, and most of the time, were surprised to learn that they preferred Pepsi's sweetest taste and not Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola's headquarters in Atlanta trembled with fear. And worse it was that his own research verified Pepsi's statement. Once again, there was no way to stop Pepsi, and in 1984, it broke a new ground when it hired Michael Jackson to be his void door. At the time, MJ was in the midst of his Thriller's success, and creative TV commercials were a success that Pepsi would hire numerous other celebrities throughout the decade, such as Tina Turner, Joe Montana, and Michael J. Fox. Pepsi really made marketing history. In the 1980s, essentially 2 types of people, Coke drinkers and Pepsi drinkers. And if you loved Michael Jackson, now I had good reason to want to be part of the Pepsi clan. Coca-Cola had already offered MJ a $1 million agreement, but this was rejected and the Jacksons moved to PepsiCo. At the time, PepsiCo CEO Roger Enrico was looking for a great idea. The goal was to make Pepsi look young and Coca-Cola looks old. And who would be better for that than the king of pop? They partnered $5 million and not only broke the record of a celebrity endorsement agreement, but also linked both entities for a whole decade. In 1985, the war was furious in the cola duopoly, and Pepsi began to beat Coke in supermarkets. Is that finally enough to beat your great rival? While the war between Cola and Pepsi continued, PepsiCo also had to pay attention to other aspects of its business. Between the late 1970s and the early 1990s, he continually expanded by buying companies outside his main focus of food and packed drinks. But in 1997, it was clear that these many non-essential businesses were not as profitable as they expected. While restaurants accounted for 36% of their portfolio, they accounted for only 22% of their $3.7 billion profit. Realizing that it would be better to simply focus on fried soft drinks and snacks again, an exit plan was established, and the previously purchased fast food restaurants were released in a new separate company called Tricon Global Restaurants, which later became Brands from Yum. After getting rid of fast food chains, a new era of acquisitions and mergers began, and it seemed that this time PepsiCo wanted to follow a new route. Seeking to add seemingly healthier products, he purchased Seagram Company's Tropicana and Dole Juice brands in 2001, and in 2001 merged with Quaker Oats Company to form a new division, Quaker Foods and Beverages. After his huge success at US PepsiCo, he has now begun to focus more on expanding his operations in other countries as well. In the early 2000s, Russia was already its second largest market, and after buying a controlling interest in Russia's largest manufacturer in 2008 and 3 years later, completing its acquisition of Wimbledon Foods, PepsiCo turned out to be the largest food and beverage company throughout Russia. Today, PepsiCo is one of the most successful brands in the world. Its product portfolio consists of a wide range of food and beverages, including 23 brands that generate more than $1 billion each in annual sales. And the company's success is driven by a wide portfolio of food and beverages that includes Fried Lay, Gatorade, Pepsi Cola, Mountain Dew, Quaker Tropicana, and SodaStream, to name a few. Like its rivals, the Pepsi brand diversified far beyond what Caleb Bradham could have dreamed. The Pepsi Cola drink is almost as famous for its memorable commercials as for its endless battle with its eternal rival. And since its inception in 1898, it has become one of the most recognizable products in the world. This was the story of PepsiCo. Did you already know your multiple bankruptcy? And what other details do you think could have been added to the story? Share in the comments and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring business videos.